Stop moving.
Officer, you need help?
Stay back, sir. I got this.
The original Resident Evil remake is considered by many to be one of the best Resident Evil games of all time. So when a remake of Resident Evil 2 was announced, fan expectations were no doubt at an all-time high. Luckily, Capcom was up to the task, and has managed to produce the best Resident Evil game in years by successfully combining elements of both the old and the new. The story, aside from a few added scenes, is basically the same as the original Resident Evil 2. Leon Kennedy, who most newer fans know from Resident Evil 4, is a rookie police officer transferring in on his first day at the Raccoon City Police Department. And Claire Redfield, Chris Redfield's sister from the original Resident Evil, is on her way to Raccoon City at the same time to find out where Chris is gone. This leads the two to meet up for a short time before quickly being separated to follow their own paths in the story. After deciding to play as Claire or Leon, you can choose between 3 different difficulty levels. From Assisted, which has lower enemy health and auto-aim, to Hardcore mode, which increases the difficulty by going to the old-school ink ribbon save system, eliminating autosaves, and making the enemies stronger. This makes the game feel very fair for newcomers and veterans alike, as newcomers are still provided a fair and adaptive challenge on normal difficulty, whereas series veterans can test their mettle in Hardcore mode right out of the gate. Using the same graphics engine that was utilized in Resident Evil 7, the first thing you'll most likely notice, especially if you're playing on a high-end PC, is the stunning graphical fidelity of the game. Characters and facial expressions are extremely realistic. Zombies shamble about with all the necessary blood and gore that you would expect. Gone are the rendered environments of the original PlayStation, instead replaced by a beautiful and modern 3D world. Resident Evil 4 was undoubtedly one of the most divisive games in the series, as it split the fanbase down the middle between people who loved the new style of Resident Evil 4 and its more action-heavy scenes, and the ones who missed the old games with their more measured pacing, item and ammo management, and survival horror aspects. Capcom has skillfully managed to marry both of these styles into one cohesive experience, thanks mainly to the way that the game has been modernized, while at the same time retaining its roots in true survival horror. It's very refreshing how Resident Evil 2 doesn't shy away from its past. Item and bullet management are still very important if you want to survive. Killing every enemy in the room isn't always an option. There are many times where you have to make a choice. Defeat all the enemies in a given area to make it through, or risk running past them to conserve ammo and health for a bigger fight later. This is especially true in the earlier parts of the game before you get more powerful weapons, where the difference between you living and dying could be just the few bullets you have left in your gun. This system is very rewarding in that it allows you to think of the consequences of your actions during every enemy encounter. The game never allows you to get too comfortable, although to assist you, you can now use wooden boards to board up windows to keep zombies from coming in. You'll no longer find Leon going through the environment mowing down every enemy with hundreds of bullets and 10 different guns in your possession. Capcom has managed to achieve a fantastic balance here, and as you walk around the environments you always feel a sense of dread, as there's always enough ammo and items to barely keep you going, but you never know what may be lurking just around the corner. Speaking of lurking enemies, the Tyrant aka Mr. X has made a return, adding yet another element of strategy and tension to the mix. Partway through the story when you run into him, he'll then spend a good part of the game slowly stalking you, adding even more for you to worry about as you fight to survive. And although Mr. X is an excellent element to add to this experience, the game always gives him a general idea of where you're located. And because of this, it can sometimes get frustrating when you're running around trying to get that last item or solve a puzzle as Mr. X pops into the room, as you have to spend a good portion of time trying to get away from him or dash to the nearest save point where he can't access you. This also adds a small feeling of disbelief as you run into the save room and Mr. X just stares at you, knowing that he can't come in due to an invisible wall. Other enemies such as the always deadly Lickers also make a return, and although other original enemies such as spiders and zombie plants have been left on the cutting room floor, and a certain iconic boss fight in the sewers has now been relegated to a smaller cutscene, the overall enemy design is still frightening and excellent. And while the enemies can be challenging, Leon and Claire can now shoot over the shoulder a la Resident Evil 4, and in a huge improvement to those controls, can now move while shooting, adding a much more realistic element to the shooting mechanics. There have been many noticeable changes. However, many of the game's most memorable elements have remained the same. The older style inventory system has made a return, where you have a limited amount of inventory space, and it's up to you to decide what's most important to take with you. This can be stressful at times, but usually save rooms with storage cases are close enough at hand for you to access your inventory when you need it. You can still mix various types of herbs both for health recovery and to increase defense. Reading materials are still scattered throughout the game to add more to the story, and all the classic puzzles that you remember from the original, as well as a few new ones, are added in for good measure. A much handier map system has also been added, in which areas change color depending on whether you found all the items in each room or not. It also remembers the items that you've come across if you don't have the room to pick them up in your inventory, making the entirety of the game much more streamlined. Your weapon arsenal can still also be advanced and modified as you find various weapon parts throughout the game. Resident Evil 2's tale is a much more focused and personal story, concentrating on just a few characters within the Resident Evil universe. Many of the scenes have been altered or expanded upon and given a much more serious and less campy tone. All in all, the game is better for it, in that it truly makes you feel the weight of your character's actions and adds a sense of urgency. And adds even more incentive to see the game through the end and experience multiple playthroughs from both Claire and Leon's perspective. Finally, to round out the excellent package, after accomplishing certain achievements in the game, you can unlock character models and concept art, as well as special weaponry for achieving certain rankings. Completionists will also have the opportunity to play through the game a second time as Claire and Leon, which changes some item and enemy locations, as well as certain puzzle solutions. Fourth Survivor mode from the original Resident Evil 2 also makes a return, in which you play as Hunk, the last surviving member of Alpha Team. This mode can be even more challenging than the main game, as you're given a specific set of items, and you then have to figure out the most efficient way to make it to your extraction point alive. And if that isn't enough, the classic Tofu mode returns as well, in which you only have a knife, a few herbs, and your wits. To further add to the replay value, Capcom also has planned free DLC in which you play as other survivors in the works. From the different paths that Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6 took, to the completely new direction of Resident Evil 7. Some people may have been questioning Capcom's vision with the Resident Evil franchise over the last few games. With the Resident Evil 2 remake, Capcom proves that they can still make a great Resident Evil experience. From the chilling graphics and soundtrack, to the more focused story and modernized yet familiar gameplay, to the much improved map interface and rewarding item management system, the game should please old and new Resident Evil fans alike. The enemy pathfinding AI could use some work, and there may be a little too much backtracking for some. But don't let that deter you from playing this extremely polished and exceptional remake. Hopefully Capcom decides to remake Resident Evil 3 in the same style, because I for one can't wait to jump into the horrors of Raccoon City one more time.